In the equation above, which of the following is a possible value of x plus 1? So to be able to answer this question, we first of all have to figure out what x is, and once we know what x is, we can add 1 to it, and then look for the correct answer from this. So we need this equation to help us figure out what x is. Now, one big issue now that we can see is the variable we are trying to solve for, which is x, is a denominator. That's never good. So our first task will be to force this to stop being a denominator, and we can do that by multiplying both sides by x plus 1. So these would cancel, and then on the left side we have to follow this out. We have x plus 1 times x plus 1, which becomes x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 2. And if you remember, if you're going to solve any quadratic equation, you need to set it equal to 0. That means we have to move this 2 back to the left side. And we can do that by simply subtracting 2 from each side, and then we'll end up with x squared plus 2x minus 1 equals 0. And now we have a quadratic equation that we can attempt to solve for using any of the methods that we've learned. Our most basic and mostly go-to method has been the x games, where we do the product, a times c, and the sum, which is b. So for this equation, you notice that the a value is 1, the b value is 2, the c value is negative 1. So when you do the product, a times c, 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, and the b value is 2. You'll find that we run into a little problem. There's no pair, there are no two factors multiply to equal negative 1, and then when those same two factors are added together equal 2. The only way to get a negative 1 is by saying negative 1 times 1, but of course when you add these you don't end up with a 2, so we're stuck here. Thankfully, we learned of two other methods. One of them was completing the square, and another one was using the quadratic equation. And using the quadratic equation is the easier method in this case, so I guess we should go ahead and do that. And the formula is negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, all of this divided by 2a. So the next step is just plug and chug. We know our b value is 2, so it's now going to be negative 2 plus or minus square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 1. All of this is divided by 2 times 1, which is simply just 2. And we'll just work this out using arithmetic. Negative 2 plus or minus square root of 4 plus 4. When you multiply this part here, it gives you a positive 4. And then all of this is still being divided by 2. So we'll keep simplifying this, and we end up with a negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 8 all over what? 2. Remember, we are able to simplify radicals. So the square root of 8 can be broken down to the square root of 4 times 2. And the square root of 4 is 2, so the 2 goes out, leaving you with a 2 on the inside. So we then know that we can simplify this yet further, and we would have negative 2 plus or minus 2 root 2, all of this over 2. Now remember that before we can call this completely simplified, you always take a moment, look at your denominator and see if it goes into both of your numerators. Remember, you can only simplify if all three of these have a greatest common factor. So, and they do in our case here. So we know that this becomes a 1, this becomes a 1, this becomes a 1. And finally, we have a fully simplified expression. So our x values are negative 1 plus or minus square root of 2. Now, since the question was asking us to figure out the possible value of x plus 1, we'll need to take one of these x values and add 1 to them and see if any of those are going to yield some of the answers given here. So let's try this first option. The x value is negative 1 plus root 2. So that's the x value. Then we add 1 to it. And the other option is negative 1 minus root 2. Then we're going to add 1 to it as well. So in this case, you notice that we have like terms. The negative 1 and 1 cancel out. So we have root 2 left. And on the other one, again, the negative 1 and the negative 1 cancel. The negative 1 and the positive 1 rather cancel, and we are left with a negative root 2. So we now glance at the answers and see which of these show up. Is it the root 2 or the negative root 2? And we can clearly see that B, root 2, is the one that shows up. So that has to be the answer.